Hey, Terrace Christian Reformed Church. It's my third video that I'm making since I got here. It follows a bit on the ones about overfunctioning and underfunctioning, because related to that can come a struggle that people might have in a church where it feels like a small number of people are doing the majority of the work, the majority of the lifting. And what I'm going to talk about today, which I call the 80-20 effect or the 80-20 principle, is related to that. So at the turn of the 1800s going into the 1900s, an Italian economist was researching agricultural wealth and income distribution in 19th century Italy. And they noticed that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. Seems sort of non-surprising, right? Looking for other places that this ratio might apply, he noticed that 20% of the pea pods in his garden contained 80% of the peas. And so there he went, searching for places where this 80-20 proportion was found. And that's a bit more surprising, the 80-20 when it comes to the pea pods in the garden. Others have since taken his findings and found other places that they seem to apply. And so the 80-20 Pareto, that was the guy's name, principle was born. And the 80-20 rule is not about exact numbers. It's about a proportion, a ratio. So that's important to keep in mind if something doesn't seem to fit exactly as an 80-20. It's a proportion. And many observations since have been created, theories, observations that fit under this 80-20 ratio. For instance, 20% of your floor gets 80% of the traffic, of the wear. You can see that especially in a type of floor or carpet that wears out. You'll see where all the traffic went. 20% of the people in a group will come up with 80% of the good ideas. In other words, not everybody in a group will come up with good ideas. 20% seems to be the proportion. And the good ideas they come up with will be the top 80% of the good ideas that come. 80% of profits come from 20% of the customers. 80% of complaints come from 20% of the customers. And they're not the same customers. Not usually. Most of us, these people that research this, have figured out wear 20% of our clothes 80% of the time. That fits me when I reflect on my clothing choices. Mind you, in Terrace, I don't have a whole lot of clothes. I don't have a full closet along with me either. We spend 80% of our time with 20% of the people we know or call friends. So those are just a few. You can look up the Pareto principle and you'll find more of these kinds of examples. And the whole way of thinking has been expanded to other things as well. So this principle applies to churches also. And I want to give you two of the key principles or statements that may be a bit of a surprise, or maybe one of them is a bit of a surprise to you. I know one of them was to me when I first learned of it. 20% of the people in the church do 80% of the work. That's a normal proportion. The second one is 20% of the people contribute 80% of the financial support, but they're not the same 20% of the people. So in other words, a 20% section may do a lot of the work, and another 20% does 80% of the funding. And that's important to understand, that proportion, because it can change our attitude. If we are in the 20% and let's say we're a church where 20% of the people are doing all the, 80% of the work, and we might start to feel resentful about that, as I said in a previous video, and complain about the 80%. But once we understand that in any group, any organization, that's a normal ratio, a normal proportion, we can somewhat ease up on it. So you could find, I have a bunch of resources where I got this information from. I don't want to make long videos, so I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff. But part of what this can do for us is that we don't waste as much time trying to get out of the 80% that aren't doing enough in our view, that we don't work really hard on all of that 80% to try and bring our number up to 21%. What I mean by work hard is like bulletin announcements and all kinds of stuff that we do to try to recruit people to do things. This is now my personal experience, is observation, knowing people, and starting to see a particular set of gifts in a person is good reason then to recruit them out of the 80% and say, I see these gifts in you. Would you be willing to test them by doing work for the church? And that could be elder, deacon, building committee. There's the sound, running the sound, creating the projections, whatever it is. So you could be efficient if you know the 20-80 rule. And you also, another advice out of this is to be the existing leadership team being as supportive as possible of the active 20, the active 20%, because and being careful to watch that they get proper breaks, that they get some relief every now and then. And as you're doing that, if you have other people that come on board and start training, then you'll have a bigger pool to pull out of for the 20% of people that need to do the tasks for the church. So there's an introduction to the 20-80 principle, the 20-80 proportion. The one that surprised me was that 20% of the people give 80% of the money. Now, I've never had that, where I've never seen a spreadsheet that didn't put me to sleep. Sorry, that's not what I meant. I never seen a spreadsheet that proved it, but when I've mentioned it to people like treasurers of churches and those who might know the numbers, they say, yeah, that fits. Hope that's helpful for you. Catch you next video.